you for joining us today. We have an exciting guest. We've been taking a look at the Near ecosystem for quite some time. And when I was in the Bahamas, I happened to jump in the same taxi as Illia, which was a nice serendipitous moment. So Illia, it's great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Let's kind of dive right into it. Give us a bit about your background first, and then we'll go into the Near protocol.
Yeah, I mean, my background is in machine learning, kind of an applied math major, but I've started working in a US company back while I was still in Ukraine, while in university, and I was doing machine learning, kind of data science, kind of across the wide spectrum. And moved to US, joined Google Research, worked on natural language. So if you ask questions on google.com, some of them maybe get answered by what my team was building. And then I worked on one of the kind of founding models that right now powers translation and GPT-3 and others, kind of attention's all you need. I left, partnered up with my co-founder, Alex, and we were trying to teach machines to code, which is, if you're familiar with GitHub Autopilot and kind of a few other efforts, which was a little bit too early back then. And that's how we stumbled upon the crypto. Is we actually had the crowdsourcing platform we built, and we were paying people around the world for the work they were doing, but it was actually pretty complicated to pay into countries like China, Russia, Ukraine, and others. And so we end up looking at crypto as a way to just use global payment system that it was promised, and realizing there's a lot of challenges with that, and starting to look how to address those challenges.
Yeah, there's a bunch of problems out there. People always try to make memes of it, how they're, it seems to be as though people are making up problems, but I just don't think people generally have a relationship with it unless you come from or you live in a third world country where remittances and payments or having a bank account or identity are all steps that are difficult to cross. I think a lot of people just don't understand how valuable this space is because of all those problems. If you live in the United States, you might be walled guarded totally from experiencing some of the problems that this technology helps solve. So tell us a little bit about the beginning journey of Near and how that started.
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much like the first idea was, can we turn this crowdsourcing system we built on blockchain? Can we leverage the smart contracts, the crypto, as a way to facilitate data collection and payment everywhere? And the answer was, well, we're paying people like 10 cents per problem, and fees back then were 15 cents. So that was way too expensive, and this is 15 cents. This is like when market was going down in 2018, and at the same time, it was like quite complicated. Like both as a developer, how do you actually put all these pieces together? And if you think of your users when they're trying to onboard, like how easy it is to get started and get using it. And so we end up looking around, we're trying to understand, what the space looks like. We looked across a lot of blockchains. We end up actually turning that into a podcast, a video podcast on YouTube, where we interviewed a lot of other protocols. But then kind of realization was that we need to actually have a protocol that is, simple to use and build on, that is, secure and is scalable. And scalability being, an important piece. And actually, like through the lenses of simplicity of easy to use, is you need to have something that, if one app becomes successful, the whole kind of platform does not become unusable. And so that's why we kind of we pulled in a really good team of engineers from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, who are like all systems engineers who build systems at scale to build kind of Near. And this was like August 2018, so pretty much 4 years ago now.
Awesome. I've been in this crypto sector for a while, back in the good old days of Fork Delta, and when I love complexity. Like as a community member, I like things that are confusing. I will constantly seek out things that I'm not good at just to see how well I can do it. But for the more, let's say, the normal participant, someone you want to bring in how does Near offer that composability and tool set that's easier to function as in comparison with like the Ethereum Solidity contracts or Solana that's I believe on Rust? How do you bridge that gap to the more, people call it the Web2 community member, but
Yeah, for sure. I think so. There's two tracks. One is the developer track, and one is the user track. So starting from developer track, being ourselves the developers who are like, well, we want to make it such that any developer, whatever language they want, they can build on this. And so we made one of the core choices is to use WebAssembly, which is actually a technology that's used in every browser on every computer. It's something that runs pretty much, optimized bytecode across, billions of devices. And so what this allows to do is to support, well, Rust as one of the most loved languages, but also kind of a lot of other languages. You can do C++. And so what more interesting is recently we launched full JavaScript support. So you are now able to write smart contracts in JavaScript, ship them to Near, and they work. You can also write your front end in JavaScript, and so you can have pretty much a full stack developer who builds a full blockchain app easily. And that's a really big change from kind of, needing to learn Solidity and needing to build kind of almost two different environments, because you are able to reuse a lot of code. You're able to kind of leverage all of the existing JavaScript libraries. And there's 20 million JavaScript developers in the world, right? So that's a pretty big, way bigger pie than if you think of Solidity developers, which is maybe like there's 300,000 that know some Solidity. And so that was one of the biggest ones, obviously all the tooling. And then there's a lot of infrastructure companies in Near ecosystem as well that provide tooling like Pagoda, which gives you everything from, your kind of lifetime of your project, upgradability, kind of making sure you are able to hide blockchain, pay for user transaction fees, like things that sound simple, but actually are very complicated in Ethereum. And like we've seen developers who come to Near who are like, holy shit, like on Ethereum, I don't just build my application, I need to build like a whole stack of infrastructure underneath. And on Near, you just build your application, actually become, build up your application versus build down infrastructure to make things work. And so that's been a pretty kind of major shift that I've seen with developers. And then on the user side, we've really invested in making it kind of straightforward, right? Like if you think of it, a 0x ABCD is not a straightforward way to like understand what my account is, right? So we have a kind of named accounts. For example, mine is Illia.near, and through that, like there's some rules how they can be set up, but they allow you to now relate to it a lot better. Each account then has a number of different ways to connect to it, right, and access it. We call them access keys, but underneath this can mean devices, recovery methods, right, applications. So it's very similar when you go to a login with Google or login with Facebook. You just add a new device. Underneath, there's a lot of mechanics happening. There's like OAuth token being dispatched and stuff like this. But for you, you just added a new device or logged in with some application. And so because of this, for example, if you log in into a game, you authorize the game, and now you can send transactions from the game without going to the wallet. You don't need to confirm every single transaction in the wallet anymore. So things like this, like really making the experience straightforward and kind of hiding a lot of complexity for the developer and for the user. And I think the most unique experience that we have, which just kind of leverages this model, is sending a link, onboarding link to the users. So you can just literally send your friend a link, and if they click on it, even if they don't have an account, they can get some Near, get some maybe USN, claim some NFT. And so I think that's a very unique experience because you don't need to install anything, you don't need to buy some crypto to get started in this ecosystem.
Yeah, that's important, onboarding and then keeping the community members in there. I have a question about one of the tech stack ideas, mostly because I don't know anything about technology. I'm a concept guy. Can you, from what I understand, Ethereum Solidity contracts were designed to be more openly capable so that it would attract more writers, basically coders. I'm assuming there's something similar to Linux. It's like, hey, this is open source. We want to encourage as many people to write and build here. How are the differences between Rust, for what I appear to be a more complex language that maybe more coders know, but this simpler language that more people might be able to figure out? Where's the bottleneck between those two, or I guess the open space?
Yeah, so Rust is kind of, it's a generic, system programming language, which you can build anything. There's people building operating systems. I think why Rust became so popular is because it kind of gives you the same performance as C++, but at the same time has very strict guarantees on the correctness of the programs. And that's a reality why both, co-founder that like one of the people who built EVM, right, is now writes in Rust and propagates WebAssembly. Like Gavin Wood, who's co-founder of Polkadot, right now is fully on WebAssembly and Rust train. And so the reality is, like, it gives you such kind of strict guarantees that it's way easier to build correct programs. Now, you still can mess it up, to be clear, but in Solidity, there's a lot of kind of caveats that were unintended consequences kind of when they were designing it that were not thought through, and that kind of developers keep facing. And there's a lot of kind of institutional knowledge now how to avoid them, and like security reviewers know how to find these issues. But generally, kind of Rust is just way more thought out and kind of strict language in a way, while still allowing to build anything. And so for smart contracts, for example, on Near, it's actually very straightforward how to do that. And like you can think of it as, conceptually as a microservice. Like it's similar how you build microservices on internet, which, they have a little bit of a database and they respond to people's requests. And so because of this, like you have a very similar model to what web developers are already familiar with. And so with JavaScript launch, it's even more kind of similar and familiar than in Rust.
Awesome. So yeah, much larger pool of people that know how to already write the code. It sounds like this is kind of a question around games and DAOs, or these autonomous organizations. I'm a huge fan of the gaming sector that's been growing up here. Initially, it was all technology. I think the tech is super important, but games feel like this Trojan horse to get the technology in as many people's hands as quickly as possible. What's the Near gaming DApp ecosystem look like today?
I would say it's still pretty early, but it's definitely one of the areas where we see a lot of exciting developments. I think because we have this kind of pretty straightforward onboarding of users, people have experimented with really cool concepts. For example, there's a project called Armored Kingdom, which is kind of co-produces Mila Kunis and folks who are like co-founder of Liquid Comics. And so their idea of kind of how to start introducing the game is actually by having physical and digital comic books. And so when you get this comic book, the first thing you can do, you can mint your NFT that is your character in a future game. And so, but this NFT is just a QR code that actually has a one-time private key, which when you scan allows you to send one single transaction to mint your character and create an account. And so I think this is kind of powerful concepts meshing together to create new experiences is what I'm really excited. It's not just, kind of pure GameFi, but actually like how do we create almost like novel media around crypto and gaming and content, right? That comes together.
Yeah, there's so much power for identifying brands early too. It's one of the things I found fascinating. These ideas of CryptoPunks, whatever chain they're on. Obviously, they were born from the world of Ethereum. How are you bridging the gap with Ethereum? Is there an EVM-like machine that you can run on Near so that some of these will become interoperable in the future?
Yeah, so because Near is kind of almost like a substrate, pun intended, you can actually build things like EVM on top of it. So you can take Ethereum virtual machine and run it as a smart contract. And that's exactly what Aurora team has done. They just allow you to kind of run in one smart contract on Near, but it's a full like as compatible to Ethereum as it possibly can be environment. And so it has already like hundreds of apps there, and tons of people using it. But the thing is, like, it's just one smart contract. So you can think of Near as at the same time being almost like a place you can launch complex things like Aurora, and there's a few other kind of large projects like Octopus that allows you to launch your own chains. And so, yeah, I think it's already there. It's actually more compatible to Ethereum than even Polygon, because the fees are paid in Ether, and then everything else is compatible the same. And they also launched a really cool thing called Aurora Plus, which allows you to have 50 free transactions per month when you sign up. And they're going to be launching more products into it. So yeah, I encourage people to check it out.
Awesome. Can you, I guess, give me an explanation of where you see the biggest problems today? We've got a bunch of layer ones out there now. From Ethereum, you've got Solana, Avalanche, there was FTM. How does Near stand apart? And then what are the solutions, or what are the problems specifically that you're hoping to tackle in the next few years?
Yeah, so I think kind of where we started it, and it continues to be, like, we think of Near as kind of the easiest blockchain, right? Is a place which going to be onboarding millions and ideally billions of people. And I don't think anybody else, for the most part, is trying to solve this problem, right? Like, people trying to make faster blockchains, or maybe more complex blockchains for whatever reason, but nobody is actually like focusing on how do we make this simple, straightforward for people? How do we make it simple, straightforward for developers? And that's, I think, is kind of our focus and edge. And the kind of looking forward, obviously continuing to do that, continuing to make sure that on infrastructure side, kind of all of the things we're doing, right, like scalability, so sharding, all those things, they need to be simple. Like, developers and users should not need to think about what's going on under the hood. It just scales and supports them. Making sure things like native meta transactions work, right? The ability to send transactions on the user's behalf, pay fees for them, kind of hiding some of the things like allowing Aurora Plus, signing up with your Face ID, with your fingerprint, and starting to transact. But even beyond that is, how do we remove the need for the user to even get explicit Near account, right? So I've kind of offered this idea of remote accounts, this idea that you can come in with your MetaMask, with your Bitcoin wallet potentially, and start using Near through that. So using Near apps through that without needing to sign up first through the new account. And we already see applications kind of adopting both this paradigm and in general the ease of onboarding for users. So specifically, Sweatcoin has onboarded over 12 million users at this point because they have like 100 million installs. And so they're, because of the model of this like ease of onboarding, they are able to onboard, I think, probably biggest amount of users single app has in blockchain. And similarly, like something like Orderly is this decentralized exchange that is able to kind of in the next versions to hide kind of the deposit from Ethereum and kind of transacting in Orderly. Like, you don't need to set up a dedicated Near account to use it. So like, kind of the idea is like, take this small experiences that people have built that are really good, and then expand it to the whole ecosystem. So like Aurora Plus, how do we give everyone free transactions? Like, what is the economics of this? How do we make everyone be able to use whatever wallet they have as whatever app on Near? How do we make it such that anybody can onboard really easily and start using apps? And so that's really kind of continuous focus.
Yeah, that's so important. There's not everyone likes to mess around as much as we do. Again, it all, things like the complexity always remind me of Ether Delta or Fork Delta. It's not a usable product at all. But if you can see where we're going, it's clearly these are all game changers. So one of the parts I wanted to go into here, I guess, is your thoughts on the NFT and DAO sector. These are both kind of hot topics. Where are the problems within DAOs or within NFTs, and can Near address any of these problems with new solutions as well?
Yeah, so I mean, we can start with NFTs. I think there's obviously been and they're kind of correlated right now in a way. NFT started as this kind of community building tool almost, right? I think the PFP is probably one of the most powerful tools that I've seen for community building. But at the same time, what I expect is a lot more kind of utility-based NFTs coming in. And so I think what Near offers is both kind of embedded into the protocol, into the kind of standard of NFTs royalties, which allows to really make these NFTs a lot more easy to travel, right? Like any marketplace on Near will actually respect the royalties and respect the kind of NFT structure. And so this allows to have the same kind of NFTs on any of the secondary markets that are there. And so I think that is, addressing some of the issues, but I think the biggest issue is like creating more utility, right? As gaming is, like things like, you have NFTs so you can have internet in any airport in the world, right? Stuff like this. Like, how do we get more kind of real world connections and community connections in this? And, I know some projects working on this, but this is still early. On the DAO side, so we have been experimenting with DAOs for about a year and a half now. And so we have Astra DAO framework, which has hundreds of kind of weekly active DAOs with thousands of members. And I think it already addresses a lot of kind of problems that people have on other chains. But I think the bigger problem for DAOs is really the same problems that any project has. The same problems any startup have is like how to grow, how to structure, how to set up legal, how to raise funds, all the same problems that everybody has. And so I think through the kind of our community and ecosystem, we've been trying to help out. We have DAOcubator effort, which was kind of an incubator for DAOs. We had a few efforts around kind of guilds where we're funding them. And so we are iterating on these programs as well. But kind of even beyond that, what we're doing right now is actually setting up a Near digital collective DAO. So this is a DAO that's going to be governing Near as a whole. And so through that, we actually want to dog food a lot of the methodology that you should be using for structuring and kind of executing DAOs. So we have a lot of work groups that are working on different aspects. We have, a two-house system for making decisions. One is house of stake, one is house of merit. So one is kind of economically aligned, one is merit aligned. So we're trying to experiment and try a lot of things so we can be kind of as ecosystem experts in this and help other people to set up their things and make them successful.
Yeah, it's such an important part. Again, one of the reasons why we like gaming is it feels like it'll have such a speed in iteration over top of, if you're running a fund, or say we even want to build a road, like it's way more difficult to deal with real world things and like, hey, we're just going to blow up a planet in a game and create a new one over here. Like the voting structure seems like iterations will speed up there. This is kind of a left field question, but well, how do you produce something? So I don't know if you'll have thought about this at all, but it's one of the questions I have. How do you produce a sovereign identity of someone who joins an ecosystem and is participating, and then allow them to build that kind of reputation score within that? Like, is that an NFT? Is it a particular type of token? How do you build sovereign identity?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I actually been thinking about it a little bit, like reputation wise, like how do you build reputation? And I think on Near, the benefit of named accounts being very powerful. So like the fact that you have a named account, right, is a powerful thing that you can, showcase on Twitter, you can showcase across, your other social. And then through that, it's NFTs that show up there. It's like which social groups you are on, which member you're off. So it's almost like a social network. And we have some projects on Near that are building out the social aspects of this and building out kind of, there's a project called Niche, which is, creating niche communities. If you have an NFT of the community you're a member of, and you have that kind of access to communication and conversation there. And so I think like aspects of that is interesting. Is like as we build your identity, you kind of almost build a reputation around that name. The interesting thing about Near is also you can sell your accounts, and so or you can turn them into DAOs. So you can actually build almost like a business out of your account, right? You can have royalties, you can maybe inflow outflow of some funds, and then you can turn it into a DAO, tokenize it, and build like a whole community out of this. So I think we'll see a lot of experimentation, I'm sure, with all this, and yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what people come up with as well.
Yeah, that is one of the most important parts of the question, I think, is it's just identity in general. I have friends who travel from all around the world, and depending on where they come from, they're always bitching about travel visas. I've been privileged with my passport. I can travel mostly everywhere, but as time moves forward, I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that their identity, as sovereign identity, is equally as important as sovereign money or contracts that are kind of within their own choice of sovereign as well. One of the next areas I wanted to dive into was about Near's relationship with other protocols. I'm sure you get to have a lot of conversations with other founders. What's the conversation around interoperability or the relationship between like other layer ones? Like how's the collaboration space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think about it is kind of cooperative competition, right? On one side, we're all trying, like there's kind of the bigger Web3 movement that we're all trying to bring together, right? And so that's why we have, done and mentioned whiteboard series. There's, I think, like 47 episodes now. The last one was with
Nice.
Juan Bennett from Filecoin, just released. And so a lot of it is like learning together, is figuring out how things work, right? I mean, when we were starting, we were actually across the street from Solana office, and so we would go and argue with Anatoly a lot over some coffee or drinks. And it's not like we don't really agree on some things, but we agree on other things, and so it's always a good conversation there. And so I think generally that is the spirit that at least I'm really pro, is like, it's a huge right now discovery stage, right, where we're all figuring out how it all works, and at the same time, we already see a lot of things that work and need to progress, and at the same time, obviously the interoperability, right? So we've launched one of the kind of only trustless bridges to Ethereum, for example, for that reason, because it's clearly that you need to be connected to other ecosystems as well, obviously, on the financial side. And so I think the interoperability kind of, there are two sides of things. I do think that there will be not that many blockchains at the end, right? I think there will be only a few left, because the network effects of the blockchain are really huge. At the same time, I think the users don't really care as much which blockchain is this app or that app, right? If they can abstract it out. And so kind of, I think the steady state of this is the interoperability kind of interconnects the blockchains that, work and secure and stable, and then kind of provide users almost a level of access that they can just go to whatever app they want. And we're, far from there, but this is kind of the direction we're all working toward.
Yeah, it's one of those important ideas here too, I think, because you've got so many communities, and the building of Web3 is this vision of decentralized ownership of everything. I think everyone's kind of aiming at the same goal and looking for the pathway to get there. I look at a lot of this like venture capital, and most people I don't think are fairly well aware of how building a business works. You've got a high degree of failure on almost anything that you're going to try necessarily. Like you invest in a company, you can go 90% of these are going to fail. Some of the best venture capitalists can get a much higher hit rate, but when you're dealing with that, one of the things I think that's important is that developer conversation. And what you've kind of highlighted here is that Solidity itself as a Turing complete language has limitations, that even if Ethereum scales up, it's going to meet limitations with some of the developers. Is there a way? So I guess maybe this is a question for within Aurora. How are the how do you get something like Rust, these games that are built in Unreal Engine 5, is the most fluid conversation in Rust as in comparison with Solidity?
Well, I think it really depends. I think what Solidity has going, which is powerful, is that there's a lot of code that's been battle tested with money. Right? There's like billions of dollars of security of code, pretty much, where if it was flawed, somebody would have stolen that. And so I think that's very powerful, and that's why one of the reasons why Aurora being successful is like people are able to take on existing applications and kind of launch them with modifications to adjust for their go-to-market. What we see with Near is that when you want to launch something that is extremely hard or even impossible to do on Ethereum, right? And there's a lot. That's when Near shines best, right? And that's where you like, for example, one of the hackers on Near put together an example where you can use Rust smart contract which call JavaScript scripts internally in your smart contract. So for people who are familiar with gaming, it's almost like when you have your gaming engine and you script it with additional logic, kind of directly while you're playing, like Minecraft style. And so like that kind of extensibility that you can do, where you can literally maybe send in a transaction with some JavaScript that will execute as a smart contract. It will execute other smart contracts on the blockchain side. That's a power that you can have. Like we have things that called Web4, which allows you to serve front end directly from a smart contract on Near. So you can have a fully packaged like front end and back end directly in the smart contract, so you don't have issues like what happened with Curve, where their front end was hijacked, right? So you can have all that kind of built. And so Near really just enables this, I would say, like way wider level of experimentation. And we already see, like for example, you can potentially run even some rendering stuff directly on as a smart contract on Near. I don't know if you need to, but people, somebody just did this for NFTs. Like they took a JavaScript library that usually used in front end and put that into smart contract to generate NFTs dynamically, pixel by pixel, as on the smart contract side. So again, I think like the reality is that Solidity just scratched the surface. Like with Solidity, people just scratch the surface of what is possible. And so now as Rust with JavaScript, it just really opens up this kind of broader availability.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited. The last few questions here are around your guys' ecosystem, some of the TVL, and you've got a fund, kind of a built-in fund that's helping develop new protocols, or sorry, new dApps on Near. Is that correct?
Well, so we have, it's kind of, our ecosystem is already pretty decentralized, and it's decentralizing more. And so kind of the way we're philosophically trying to think about it is we want, as I mentioned, make projects successful. And so to do that, you need teams that are working with new projects, with existing projects, to both helping them fund them, but also helping them with marketing, with token economics, with all of those things that especially new developers are not very familiar with. And so we've kind of both branched out and partnered, and they kind of came about themselves with a lot of we call them hubs. And so there's like vertical hubs like Proximity, which is focused on DeFi. There's a Human Guild focused on gaming, and then there's like a few more starting. There's like pure VC, like MetaVab, Move, that are investing in projects. And there's a regional hubs, which are focusing specifically on the region and have a product lab, a VC, kind of DevRel, like everything localized. So we have that for China, for Vietnam, for Kenya, kind of Ukraine that moved to Portugal sadly, and we're starting more. And so I think kind of the general idea is I'm actually starting to talk about it more as there's a kind of the protocol with a consensus that runs Near, and also there's now an organizational protocol which has a lot of these hubs, almost like nodes in this organizational network, that are kind of expanding and growing the network as well. And so yeah, I think that's probably, at least from my perspective, one of the biggest ways to grow the ecosystem.
Awesome. Well, Ilya, it's been a pleasure chat. I don't want to take up too much of your time today because I know it's getting getting closer to your evening time in Spain. Is there any other hot topics we should go over before we close out today's chat, and where the Bear family can find you guys, keep up to date? All the Twitter links and stuff are down below as well.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is we have Neocon happening in Lisbon on September 11th to 14th. So I invite everyone to join. It's neocon.org for the tickets and information.
And what were the days? Sorry.
September 11th to 14th.
Oh,
okay, yeah,
there'll be coming up here.
Yeah, there'll be a ton of content. It's building beyond the hype. It's how do we kind of? I mean, NEAR was never a hype thing. It was always how do we build the things that folks really need, and then help everyone to succeed.
Awesome. Well, we'll stay in touch. I'll see if I can maybe make it out to Lisbon for that one. I'm going to try to put more travel on the to-do list. It was a pleasure meeting you, and great to catch up. One of our internal devs is a big fan of NEAR, so I was happy to have you on the call and learn more about what you guys are building today. Bear family, if you made it through the whole 45-minute conversation, we appreciate you. Give us a thumbs up. Leave all your thoughts, your questions, comments down below. You know our idea here. We try to speak with as many interesting people as possible and learn as much along the way. So I look forward to the next chat, Ilya, when we catch up. Yeah. So, and again, one more time, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you.